And who's this talking to you? Some of you might say. I've been away for a couple of months, and I've only been chairman here about any vintage car club for a couple of months before that. So some of you might have forgotten who I am already. My name's Don White, and I'm very proud to chair tonight's meeting. We've got a very special guest who we'll introduce later. But this meeting tonight's going to be a little unusual. We're not going to dwell on our actual housekeeping stuff so much. We'll address a lot of that next month when we have our December club night. But I'd like to welcome the Ford Mustang Owners Club, the Tauranga Mini Owners Club, the MG Car Club, the Morris Minor people. Are there any other clubs who've come along tonight? Hands up, please.
Tauranga Classic Motorcycle.
Classic Motorcycle Club from Tauranga. Excellent. Yes.
Bay Riders.
Bay Riders. Good to see you. Yes. Cadillac Club. Awesome. Zephyr Zodiac Club. Thank you, Tony.
Waikato Vintage Car Club.
Waikato Vintage Car Club. One of our cousins. Yes.
Eastern Bay Vintage Car Club.
Another cousin. Thank you. Awesome. Who else? Doug Lloyd.
Morgan Club.
Morgan Club. Awesome. Alfa Romeo. Grant.
Historic Muscle Cars.
Historic Muscle Cars. What a great assembly of people we got here tonight. Hey, put your hands together for everybody. Also, a warm welcome to any other motoring and motorsport enthusiasts that I recognise in the room. We were going to have Paul Fahey along here tonight as well. He's an honorary member of our branch, but Paul unfortunately has got a stomach upset and he's really, I only talked to him 20 minutes ago. He said, I so wanted to come tonight. He also owes me $50, so I'm going to catch up with him later. Also, I'd like to thank, and this comes from me very sincerely, I'd like to thank the BoP VCC committee for holding the fort and working unsupervised in a splendid manner while I was away. Thank goodness I didn't return to a raft of problems. The committee and their supporters dealt with all of those while I was away. And they did such a good job that I think I'll plan another extended holiday sometime soon. Okay. Now, some brief matters of housekeeping. We've got a midweek run to Whangamata planned for this Wednesday, the 13th. We arrive at Whangamata at the Classic American Cars. There's a museum there at 11 a.m. and we have a good look in there. There's American muscle cars, all sorts of Americana to view. There's Elvis Presley stuff. There's two Checkers sound system. That'll be interesting. And we'll spend an hour in there. And then after that, we're going to adjourn to the Whangamata RSA for lunch at midday. Can I have a hands up there who, from people who think that's a jolly good thing to do on a Wednesday? Excellent. Now, pay attention to your emails, people, please. Karen, our club captain, is going to put out some more buzzers, as she calls them, between now and then. So all the detail will be there. Hopefully we'll be able to get that run in without too much of a problem weather-wise. Another event that I'm aware of is Friday the 6th of December. There's the annual toy run for charity. And we always run that for children's charity. Sometimes we've done that for the Children's Ward Hospital. Sometimes we've done that for other aspects of charity that involves children, come from dysfunctional families, broken homes and the like. So how that runs is that we always assemble down at Sulphur Point from about 5:30 on Friday, the 6th of December, which is the first Friday in December. We gather there. Usually we have 200 to 300 cars assembled. There's Bay Riders, there's people that come over from the Waikato, there's Americana, vintage cars, classic cars, there's all sorts. So it's great to just walk around and just see who's brought what. Now also your entry fee, you can either give cash or bring a small toy, a gift wrap toy, and then that gets passed on to the authorities. What happens is that the run leaves Sulphur Point around about 6 p.m, goes over to the Mount once the rush hour is dealt to. And then they come back over the Harbour Bridge and go down to Fraser Cove where they assemble and the public can view all the cars. And then a lot of people go into World's End and do a bit of the biking. So does anybody else know of any other major fixtures and runs concerning cars between now and Christmas? Americana, did someone say? When's that?
Basic flyer.
Basic Flyers, is that the 17th of November? 17th. Yep, so there's another one. Okay, excellent.
Carapiro car show put on by the street.
The Carapiro Car Show, is that also tied in with a swap meet? Okay, so there's a swap meet there the week before. So what date was that again, please? What date is that again? 24th of November? Okay, yes,
The Waikato British Car Club swap meet was on the week before,
okay,
17th.
17th
Carapiro Domain.
at the Carapiro Domain. Thank you for that. That's always a biggie, by the way. Paradise Valley, they always have theirs, Rotorua Vintage Car Club, they always have theirs around July. But Carapiro, what you guys do over there, that's also equally big, so thank you. Any other events coming up between now and Christmas that I don't know of? Because I've only just got back from overseas. Okay. Just to let you know about what I found out when I was overseas was very, very interesting. I went on a 8-week tour. I covered 10 countries, 9 capital cities, did a lot of busing, flying, driving, and boating. Very interesting. What I expected to see castles and churches and mountains and sceneries, and I expected that. But what I didn't expect was the changing dynamics with the motoring industry and the changing dynamics that's out there with the AU concerning what we do with our motor vehicles sometime in the very near future. There's a thing called the 2030 UN agenda coming out, and that's only 6 years away from when it's going to be strictly enforced. So it's time for us now to do a bit of thinking, and time for us now to think that we can't possibly always do things the way we did. We assume, we just talked about going to Whangamata on Wednesday. We assumed we could go and do these things. If the UN 2030 agenda has things their way, there might be all sorts of constraints put on that type of activity. There's a big groundswell over there of people in high places and councils and government. They think that we're very responsible for the melting ice caps and so on, and our activity with what they call ice vehicles, internal combustion engine vehicles, contributing perhaps much more significantly than really is the case. The irony is that they're pointing the finger at car owners and motorsport competitors, but meanwhile, there's countries like India, China, and so on opening about 45 to 50 coal-fired power stations a month. So we're just a drop in the bucket. But because this UN 2030 agenda seems to have a lot of traction, we're going to wake up in the mornings in the years not too far away, and there will be a lot of legislation done almost by stealth, where we'll be told that what we have always done may not necessarily be the case. So that was a real eye-opener for me. When I was in Lisbon, I walked down to the civic centre, and there's these lovely old restored buildings, and 5 stories high, they're covered in huge banners promoting the World UN 2030 agenda and how cars are bad and how this is going to be a civic free car zone, and how everyone might as well just be on the bike with us. And look, there's merit in that, most certainly, don't get me wrong, but it's going to be quite draconian if everyone has to adhere to this. I gather the historic London to Brighton rally, I was talking to people when I was overseas about that, that's run for something like 120 years. That has not been given approval to be held this year. The reason? The London Council and the Brighton Council have got their heads together. They've looked at the application form that's been submitted, and they've said, no, we don't think we'll have that congestion and all these cars all belching fumes into the atmosphere this year. That's not really where we're coming from. Permission to fly. So I see that as the thin edge of the wedge. Really, what can we do? Well, possibly we can question and we can submit a little bit of pushback. We've got about 6 years to do it. It's hopefully not a worst case scenario for our interests and things like that, but it is a bit of a worry. And all my life, all my adult life, probably like a lot of you people in this room, I've been involved very much with cars and motorsport and rallies and car club activity and things like that. But worst case scenario, we could be sort of portrayed as the really bad guys. So I hope it doesn't come to that. But if we can push back perhaps on some of this movement that seems to be gaining traction, that would be a wonderful thing. Now I see our guest speaker has arrived. So that'll save me sort of filling some dead air, as we call it in the radio. I'd like to welcome into the room, please, Garry Jackson. Put your hands together for him. Come on up. I've known Garry for a while, and we've shared all sorts of very interesting discussion. But Garry is the president. He's in charge of the Federation of Motoring Clubs in New Zealand. So he's pretty much a motoring icon as far as it's concerned. He's the number one spokesperson when it comes to what we do and where we're heading. So Garry, I know I've dropped you right in it quite quickly, but there's your lectern over here. And feel free to start up fairly shortly, and we've got our projectionist Keith and assisted by George. I've handed them the USB stick, so they're all good to go.
That's good. Does everyone want a comfort break beforehand, or should we just get straight into it?
What do you think? You give them
I don't mind.
give them 30 seconds to scratch themselves and scratch. Okay, permission granted. Just while you get your paperwork out. Okay, and thank you so much for coming. And Garry has come. He's not been paid by us. He's not been paid by the Federation of Motoring Clubs. Garry is doing this on his own back. So that's wonderful. He's flown into Tauranga just this afternoon. He's going to give the talk. And please, at the end of the talk and during the talk, feel free to question him on anything that he raises. And if you want to have explained further, that's the whole point of this gathering tonight. Thank you.
Cell phone. Like the air the mic works. They can hear everything you and I are whispering. Better, right? But you did. But when you did, I like this one. Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Great to be with you in Mount Maunganui. I was going to say Tauranga, but I'll be more precise. Okay. This all came about because in February of last year, so whatever that is, 18, 19 months ago, I had the good pleasure of being in Oamaru. I'm based in North Canterbury. I live in a little township of Amberley, just 30 minutes north of Christchurch. At that point, I've been involved in the Federation for a short time, and I went to a Model T run out of Oamaru in North Otago. And I happened to meet Jim and Karen Smiley. And as you all know, when you meet Jim and Karen, you don't forget them, you keep in touch, you get caught up in the energy with which they live their lives. And out of that, I've been in touch with them a number of times. I've had the good fortune through the VCC of being at their AGM or their national management meeting in Christchurch on 2 occasions. And through that, I've been able to particularly keep in touch with Karen and obviously with George Keir, the president of the VCC. And out of all of that, Karen made the suggestion that why don't I, at a suitable time, come to the Bay of Plenty, join in one of your club nights, give a bit of perspective, not only, I guess, on who I am and a little bit, but about the Federation itself. So great to be with you tonight. So that's the background. So with that, let me launch into this. Karen's brief to me was reasonably broad. Tell them, Garry, a little bit about yourself and who you are and in a relation to, your role as the president of the Federation. Tell them a little bit about what the Federation actually is and what it does or is trying to do. A little bit about maybe the survey. We'll just go on to that next slide. Can we do that? Where's the man? Here we are. And a little bit about the Federation itself, the survey, a little bit about what we're trying to do with government. Anyone in the room halfway interested in what we might be trying to do on warrants of fitness? Put your hand up. Okay, I'll give you an update on that. And a little bit of discussion around our future plans, opportunities, challenges that we face. If you're okay, I'd like to get through this pretty much, I guess, as I've got it on screen, and then take any questions from any aspect, any angle at the end. If there's something really burning with you that I say that you want to comment on or object to, don't hesitate. But in the main, if we can hold the questions till the end, that might be the best way to do it. Okay, my background, all I'm saying up there is, as you can see, Canterbury born, bred, educated, and a photo of an old house. This I'm just going to do very quickly all the way through. You're going to see lots of photos, but it sounds a bit like a life story, but I want to try and keep it relevant. That house is up there because that was the first European-built house on the Canterbury Plains. And if any of you know Canterbury and the proud traditions of Canterbury, and I'm not here to talk about rugby, the Dean's family were the founding fathers of Canterbury from a European perspective. That house was built 2 years before the Deans arrived by the Deans' chosen carpenter, a guy by the name of Samuel Manson, who was their carpenter back in Scotland in the 1830s. And Samuel Manson, the builder of that cottage, is my great-great-grandfather. So if you know a little bit about Canterbury, you know the pride and the history, and my family go back that far. Born in Christchurch. My dad, sadly, I never really knew. He passed away when I was just 5 years old. And whatever memories have long since sadly disappeared. My mum, a very strong, independent widow, brought myself and my brother up, went to school through the usual, public school system, Shirley Boys High School in this case, in Christchurch, then went on to Canterbury University, did a BA in economics and geography, and pumped gas along the way there with some pocket money from about 1968 to 1970. What's important in this story is nothing to do with my background or my schooling or whatever else. Next slide. Is what got into my head and what influenced me. And as a young kid, 14, 15, 16, growing up in Christchurch, what you see there in those photos is what influenced who I was then, what I was interested in. And if I look right back from 1964 to here we are now in 1984, in 2024, I should say, 1984 along the way, but 2024 today, who I am all started from what I read in the newspapers and heard on radio in those days. McLaren, Amon, Denny Holm, Le Mans winning, Ford and Motorsport, McLaren getting started in their own company, Can-Am Racing and so on. All of that set a picture in my head as a young person cycling to school, cycling to university, about what I might want to do. From there, next slide. When you believe in something, somehow fate steps in, you get a bit lucky when things fall in the right place. At the end of 1970, early 1971, there was Ford Motor Company of New Zealand advertising for graduates to come and join Ford Motor Company at the Seaview plant in Lower Hutt, in the head office, not on the line, in the head office, And I started there in 1971 and worked through a variety of jobs at the analyst level and so on. Worked on the launch of the 77 Cortina. I was sort of the car marketing guy at that stage. The yellow Escort was actually the very first brand new car. By 1973 or 1974, I was able to buy that as we were importing those cars in those days. And as a young graduate in the office with a bit of a petrol head in the back of my mind, somehow I got the job being the interface between the Ford people down in Lower Hutt and this rally team sitting in Auckland, which in 1976 got branded as the Massport Escort Rally Team. And I became the little guy on the ground that was sort of the interface, working with Doug Benefield, who was the boss guy of Massport, Ray Stone, Chris Porter, and a whole lot of people who've actually become lifelong friends, but it goes back that far. If any of you, Chris won't mind me saying this, if any of you in the room have got an ounce of Ford blood and a sense of being a collector looking for an absolute world-class prized possession, the Hanu Mikkola 1979 RS Escort is for sale. That car that won the rally in 1979, that's with Mikkola there, driving, Arnie Hertz, the co-driver beside him. That car came out from Europe, was bought by Doug Benefield of Massport. They left the car here, Doug bought it. That car itself has got a history of 4 major placings, first in New Zealand, a couple of seconds in Europe and England, and 1 third. It got driven by Mikkola, Waldegaard and Vartanen in its 4 rallies. Never got bent beyond a fender repair or a minor panel scrape. Never been rebuilt. It's for sale in Auckland today. I just mentioned that because Chris would like me to do that. Okay, moving on quickly. Next slide. After those young days, I got the chance to move into what was effectively the senior management team. I became the marketing manager of Ford nationally in 1980, and then the sales manager, which was sort of another step up, in 1982. In those days, hands up if you remember, the Dennis Waterman ads and the Minder and all the rest of it. I had the good fortune of putting all that together and even got a handshake. It's not over the bonnet, but a handshake with Dennis. We launched Laser. We did other advertising programs. And the other thing was that, again, through the petrol head that's in me, I sort of got Ford a little bit more involved in motorsport and sort of fronted a lot of that, not only in Formula Ford and Laser Sport, but I got to work with Ernie Sprague and Peter Wilson. What you see there is the Fairmont straight off the Ford Motor Company car park with a little bit of Peter Wilson tricks to it, that won B&H in 1981 with Sprague and Garry and Leo driving. You see up there as well the Leo Leonard Falcon. That shot is actually at Bay Park. How local is that? How special is that? That was the ANZ Touring Car Championship of 83, 84. It was its first race, and we won that first meeting, and we won that championship. That was, again, Peter Wilson engineered, Garry on Ernie on spanners, Garry behind the wheel. And in that Telstar, which was the 83 B&H, that was Dick Johnson, believe it or not, and Garry Sprague, and I helped put all of that together. It was a wonderful experience. Something happened in 1984, and I fell in love with a lovely lady. We go to the next slide. You don't see her too much here, but you do see her in black and white. We got together in 1984, my darling Loretta, and at the same time, within a few weeks of that, I got a phone call from Peter Gibbons of Colonial Motor Company. I'm age 35 at this stage. I'm a factory guy, done all those jobs that we just talked about. And he said, Garry, I know you're going through some changes. We, Colonial Motor Company, are going through some changes. We need a new dealer at South Auckland Motors. in Otahu and would like to offer you the job. I couldn't believe the call, or that there was actually a lunchtime conversation. Cutting a long story short, I then spent 5 years as the dealer principal of South Auckland Motors, Otahu as it was in those days, but the plan was on the table to build the new dealership in Manukau City. And the building design had been sort of agreed. Colonial, by the way, had owned that land since 1967 in Manukau City, opposite the city centre there. And anyway, I got to put some finishing touches into that dealership of how we wanted it to work from an internal viewpoint. We opened it, we cranked it up. As I say, I'm 35 years of age. There's people in that dealership working for it who've been working in Sam's since before I was born. They had, 40 years experience. I had to learn a whole lot about management and leadership and taking a whole lot of people with me when I was the new kid on the block. That teaches you a whole lot around leadership, teamwork, getting people aligned, selling the big picture of where we're going. Now let's all go there together. We took that dealership from being the 8th biggest Ford dealership in New Zealand in 1985 to the 2nd biggest dealership on volume by 1990, and it's still number 2 today. Huge learning experience for me. We got to do some pretty interesting things. You see there, sorry, could we just, you get to see there, we did some interesting things in the community, got involved with the local police. I have to say this because it's a bit topical. Being South Auckland, we also got involved with the mongrel mob. And over a coffee or a drink, whatever we do, Don, later on, if you want to talk about it, let me tell you about Star, the leader of the mongrel mob in Papatoe in 1988, whatever it was, and some of the stuff we worked on together. True story. It's an interesting story. What you also see there is, I ain't my darling, but in a photo you would never do today. You might not see it clearly on screen, but on there is the Ranfurly Shield, the Trans-Tasman, and the World Cup. All 3 trophies sitting in our dealership for a group of about 200 clients who were coming in to have a drink, listen to a guest speaker, and see all 3 trophies in one place. And oh, by the way, you could sit and reach and touch them. Can you imagine security letting you do that today? Okay, moving quickly from there. Dealership was lovely. I enjoyed it. I'd still be there today as a dealer, and I wouldn't be in Federation. I wouldn't be anywhere else, but loving running a dealership, except that Ford Motor Company leaned on me in a way that they did it, whatever. They got me in a down moment, whatever it might be. I went back to Ford New Zealand in 1990 as the Director of Sales and Marketing for Ford. Ended up running some ad programs like the Have You Driven a Ford Lately ad that we did, which used the voice of Annie Crummer and the visuals of Annie Crummer, famous New Zealand vocalist. I still go to wherever she's playing to listen to her. Still a great voice. But in the early 1990s, the business went south, and I couldn't find a headline to show what was going on in the country, but I did find a photo of Ruth Richardson, the mother of all budgets, whatever year that was, 1991, I think. What happened was then, if those of you will know far better than I, the economy started heading downhill. The motor industry was in dire straits. Japanese imports were flooding in the very, first, second or third year of those. And all of that turned to real pressure. And the Ford Motor Company globally would then put real pressure on Ford New Zealand, which says, what are you going to do to sort this out and get back to making at least break even? Because if you can't, we'll just close the doors. And of course, what happened in the late 1990s, every manufacturer, in fact, did close the doors. But in the meantime, this is 1991, 92, we wanted to fight that. and the budget cuts, the pressure was so great. Our advertising budget that used to do everything you wanted to do and all the great ads you could make, and you'd run them 5-6 times a night for 5 nights a week, whatever. The ad budget by 1992, the way it had been cut, was worth 1 ad a day for 4 nights a week. That's all it would, on one channel, that's all it would buy. So myself and a guy from our ad agency who was working in-house with us brainstormed, if that's all the money would buy, what would you do? So we said, you'd buy that 1 ad in the best possible spot you could and do it at the cheapest possible cost. And that's what created what you see up there called the Ford Report, which used to sit in the middle of the 6 o'clock news. And we would just use it. We used a studio at TVNZ at no cost to put it together with a couple of nice people doing the presentation, and without fancy pictures or music, whatever, just tell New Zealand what Ford were doing. So we did that, and of course I got a buzz through the whole of the 5-year period working with an old friend, Paul Radisich. He'd won the World Touring Car Championship for Andy Rouse and Ford back in 93, then 94, and we got him to put his name and his engineering input into a Telstar, which still today commands huge premium. It's a classic car in its own right, and not many Ford people get to actually put a car together like that. I got lucky working with Paul and the fact we were able to do that. Out of the Wirri plant, we put our own springs and seats and shocks and everything else that we did in that car. We did all of that locally. Chris Amon did a bit of that for Toyota. We went a lot further with that. We got it through the Ford system and it worked gangbusters. Okay. 1995, things changed again. Mandela came to power in South Africa, and the joint venture that Ford had in South Africa had gone downhill since Ford got out of the business in South Africa in the early 80s under the sanctions that the United Nations and all that put on. The Ford business went downhill. The joint venture tried to carry on but lost its way. Mandela came to power. He spoke, even before he got elected president, he spoke to Ford, IBM, Caltex, Coca-Cola, a couple of others, Ford one of them, to say, I need you to reinvest in South Africa. The future of South Africa and delivering prosperity for our people, our black people and our white people, but bringing South Africa together the way Mandela was working. I need investment. I need you to come back as big corporates. I need you to build your businesses. I need you to employ people, because if we don't create economic growth, we will never have social prosperity. That was Mandela's philosophy. Smart guy, great leader, the most humble person, and he took South Africa with him. I was fortunate. I got handpicked, or whatever the words are, or pressured, or maybe I was the last cab off the rank. I don't know. But Loretta and I and our 2 young daughters headed to South Africa, probably a 5-year appointment, to try and work within this JV and get it back on track, which we were able to do. We got it back up to number 2 in the market. We got a lot of success into our dealers. The dealers started making money. Again, they've been losing money for years. We got media support, and we did all of that in a pretty challenging lifestyle. And you know all the history of South Africa, the trips you probably have made to South Africa and the issues that you face, whatever. We got through all of that, but the one thing we didn't see coming, and it was a fabulous experience, as you can see there, and it was unique for a Ford guy, because suddenly, as well as Ford, I had responsibility for Mazda, Mitsubishi, Pajero, and Jaguar. And if that wasn't enough, New Holland tractors. And we had tractor dealers in the Free State who would sell 20 new tractors a month. I mean, it was big time business. So anyway, good fun, worked well. There's photos there with Alex Trotman, who was the global president of Ford, who came to visit. You see the Pajeros there out in a Drakensberg mountain setting on a big run that we did. But the thing I didn't count on, none of us knew, was that at the end of 1999, Ford was hitting a wall. Some of you will remember Explorers falling over with tire problems and whatever. The Ford share price took a big hit. Ford was taking a big hit in the US from a public viewpoint. The share price plummeted. Ford then does the only thing it knows, which is just clamp down, cut cost, say goodbye to people, whatever. And I ended up on an early retirement package at the age of 50, back to New Zealand. No other job at that stage that I wanted or that they could provide. So we shook hands. We did an early retirement deal, and then on to this next slide, you find me settling in Amberley in North Canterbury. Won't go into the reasons why, but that's where we settled, got us back into a New Zealand lifestyle. We bought a property that we were able to buy at a price that allowed us to then redevelop the house, which you see in those photos. 40 acres of land. Loretta wanted to go lifestyle farming, fatten cattle. That's fine, let's go and do it. Needed horses as well. Yep, built stables, do that. I bought my first Mustang. But in the middle of all of that, next slide, be careful what you wish for. I threw my hat in the ring for the mayoralty of the Hurunui District Council, thanks to some locals in 2003, I should say, who convinced me that they needed someone to run for mayor. And in a moment of weakness, I put my hand up. And anyway, we put a campaign together. I ended up then as the mayor of Hurunui District Council for 2 terms. All I will say, any of you involved in local government today, around the room, from an elected viewpoint or an officer?
Software, actually.
Software, no, that's okay. If you're involved, okay. All I was going to say is, as an elected councillor, I know you've been through elections in Tauranga recently and so on, it is the most challenging, the most draining, but potentially the most rewarding experience of your life. It'll drag you right down when, as mayor or even as a local councillor, you're suddenly responsible for every bloody, pardon my language, pothole in the town. You know, you fight to get people to think of the big picture of where you're trying to go. And suddenly all the automotive experience in the world went out the window because this was right back down to grassroots. But anyway, I think we made it work. I got re-elected for the second year, for the following election in 2007. We kept doing what we were doing. We did the right thing, I think, for a lot of people. And interestingly, I remember in 2010, not long before I stepped down, we had a visit into the council from 3 cabinet members then of the newly elected John Key government, Rodney Hyde, who was Minister of Local Government, David Carter, Minister of Agriculture, Nick Smith, who was the Minister of the Environment. The 3 of them sat in our council chambers and actually said, guys, I don't know how you do it. We don't know, you know, we're not here to critique you, whatever. All we want to do is tell you from our records, you're one of the best run councils in New Zealand. So we took the accolade and that felt pretty good. Okay, out of the frying pan into the fire. As I stepped down from council, I then got a call which said, Garry, we need some help in China. Ford was on a growth plan in China. They had 150 Ford dealers across China in the year 2010. They had a $6 billion US program to build new plants, build new cars, appoint new dealers, and grow the Ford business in China. And I got a call which said, Garry, can you come and help from a strategic viewpoint? And I ended up as a senior consultant, was what they put on the business card, doesn't matter, for Ford China and Chang'an Ford, which is the name of their joint venture operation, which lasted for 9 years. The old saying, I guess, when one door closes, another one opens. Interesting assignment. Do I like China? I wouldn't live there. I didn't even live there for the 9 years. I spent every second month on the ground in China. either the city of Chongqing or Shanghai, depending on which piece of business we were working on. And then I worked from home for the next 30 days. So lots of flights, lots of hotel bills that Ford had to pay, but I didn't want to live there. Loretta didn't certainly want to live there, but I wanted to give it a shot, and we gave it a shot. We worked on a whole lot of strategy about getting those, taking from 150 Ford dealers by 2018, I think we then had 700 Ford dealers. So we'd gone from 150 to whatever that is, 550 increase. We prepared a whole, and many of these dealer businessmen had never been a dealer before. Not like New Zealand, where you could go and talk to Giltrap or Rick Armstrong or whoever and find people who were already in the business and grow them. These were people who'd come right outside of the car business. We prepared all the training for them that they needed, all the processes, everything that I guess some of us had learned from experience, turned that into a program which I think worked pretty well. For me, the big buzz on that was doing the launch of Lincoln into China. I got the job of writing the strategy of how would a Lincoln dealer treat the customer in a way that a luxury car customer wants to be treated, and different to what BMW, Audi, Lexus, and Mercedes-Benz were already doing in China. Lincoln was coming in to face off against those four, but needed a point of difference. And we did a thing called the Lincoln Way, where we recrafted in a perfect world, without the Giltraps or the Armstrongs preaching how they want to run the business, in a theory case, but theory with experience. How would you run a luxury car dealership and treat people differently and convince them that Lincoln is the way to go? And cutting a long story short, that's what we did. We put it together, and it's gone gangbusters. Same time as all of that, joined the Rotary Club in Christchurch because I had a sense of community and wanting to keep involved, particularly not only in North Canterbury, but the city of Christchurch. So joined the Rotary Club. Sorry, that next slide. And I spent a year in there. Though, any Rotarians in the room? Few, couple. Ended up, I still love Rotary. I'm not their best attendee at the moment, but I spent a year as president of the Christchurch Rotary Club, third oldest in New Zealand. Again, one of probably the most rewarding experiences. Along the way through all of this, next slide, deeply involved in the Mustang Club. You saw that 70 Mach 1 that was in an earlier photo at Ambley House. That was my first Mustang, joined the Canterbury Mustang Club in the year 2000. President, as you see there on screen, from 2016 in Canterbury through to 2023. I stood down from that when I joined the Federation. Been involved in organising 2 national Mustang conventions over those years, 2014 and 2020. Both of those conventions, pretty big scale stuff, 225 vehicles, 500 plus people. And you see the photos there. If you're a car club person, be careful what you get asked to do. I ended up as the editor of what we call our Burble magazine, our quarterly A4 32-page magazine. And I ended up writing that for 3 years. So be careful what, it was a great experience, but I did it. Just about wrapped up, guys. I know this is a long story, but it all paints a picture of where I want to take you. Personal touch. All this is about me. I want to move away from that a little bit. Married to Loretta. We got together, as I said earlier, in 1984 until her sad passing in 2022. Daughter's Erin, who lives in Queenstown with grandchildren Theo and Florence, who are down there in that picture on the far left. And my other daughter, Charlotte, who lives in Christchurch. Interests outside of everything else include handyman projects, landscaping and gardening. I enjoy cooking. Quite enjoy the challenge of doing a dinner party. Love rock music. I'm the ultimate Rolling Stones fan. Mick Jagger is my hero. If you can be a student of the London School of Economics in 1962, then form a rock band that everyone says are not a patch on the Beatles and won't last and look how scruffy and You know, they are the attitude of the Rolling Stones in the early 60s. And there he is today as Sir Michael Jagger, 81 years of age, still doing it. Mick Jagger is my hero. Sorry. And Mustangs. I happen to own 4. You see them there on screen. I have actually just worked out you can only drive one at a time. I love history. I want to make that point, particularly in the room of the VCC. I love history in every which way, and particularly automotive. And the shot is one of my hero and favorite shots of Loretta and I and Colonial Motor Company's quadricycle. And up there on the top right is a photo of myself last December with Jim Farley. Hands up those who've heard of Jim Farley. Anyone? President and Global Chief Executive of the Ford Motor Company worldwide. And I got to sit around Highlands Park last December in the peanut slab car at full race pace, Farley driving. He's a historic racer. He and I alone in the car, 5 flat out laps, and then an hour over lunch afterwards. I'll tell you over coffee later. Bit of a surprise. But all of that, what about what I call at age 75, my final gig? And the final gig, Federation of Motoring Clubs. That's where my heart is, where my energies are, and what I want to talk about for the rest of tonight, because I want to go into a bit of detail about what we're working on. I'll just tell you how I got involved, because this is an important piece of the puzzle, I think. In about 2021, I think, as president of the Canterbury Mustang Owners Club, I saw an article that the Federation had, I think it was on the last page of Classic Driver. Roy Hughes had written it somewhere about emissions or fuel supply or something. And I saw on the bottom, Federation of Motoring Clubs. I'd never heard of it. And I thought I'd been around a little bit, I might have, but anyway. I did a searched the web, saw who the Federation was. I see Bruce is here somewhere. I saw that the Bay of Plenty Mustang Owners Club, the Auckland Mustang Owners Club, the Waikato Mustang, they were all members of the Federation. Canterbury wasn't. So anyway, I went to our committee, said, guys, we should join up to this. We should be part of it. So we sent in our application form, and that all went through. 2 days later, I got a phone call from Harry Deinhoven, who many of you will know that at that stage, the president of the Federation, and still on the executive of the Federation. He said, hey, Gary, thanks to the Canterbury Mustang Owners Club. I see you've joined up, etc., etc. Great to have you on board. I said, that's fine, Harry. I had to do it. Should have done it long ago. But anyway, we've done it. He said, no, that's not what I want to talk about. He said, I've checked your CV or I've looked at you on Google, whatever he'd done. He said, I think we'd like you on the executive. And he said, would you be happy, as well as just joining the Federation, can you give your time to be an advisor, like a ring-in, onto the executive committee of the Federation? I said, sure, Harry. I mean, I had time to do it and all the rest of it. I said, I'd be honoured to do it, blown away to do it. So that's how I got involved. And we'll talk a bit more about that maybe in a moment. So I've told you that story just to give you a little bit of background, I guess, about some of the business challenges, the issues, the opportunities that I've had to work on. And I now want to talk a little bit now about the Federation itself. So let's go into the next piece of this. I think there's a heading slide there. Okay. A little bit of background to start with, and again, forgive me if this goes over old ground for many of you, but I want to sort of set the scene of the Federation as I see it today. And all cards on the table, this is a personal opinion. This is not a presentation that's been endorsed by the executive. In fact, 2 members of the executive in the room tonight, at least 2, are seeing this for the first time. But I just want to set the scene, so we're all on the same page. The Federation itself, if you don't already know, was founded in 1994 in a meeting late that year, held in Taupo, coordinated by the VCC to bring the parties together, and they were about 30 odd, 31, I think, car clubs, primarily from around the North Island, who came together to talk about where we're at, where we're going, the challenges around us, and do we need some form of, for want of a better word, parent group. And they were calling on some UK experience that they were aware of at that time, particularly through the research that the VCC had done. So the end result of that was an agreement was formed out of a working group. It was endorsed in the early stages of 1995 that the Federation, the New Zealand Federation of Motoring Clubs, and that's where the name was set at that point. There are other alternatives, but that's the name they settled on, would be set up. Today, as you see there, the present membership is 150 specific clubs, accounting for nearly 149,000 members. In that number of 150, the VCC is one club. It doesn't include branch by branch. It's the VCC is one of the 150. The New Zealand Hot Rod Association, who were also involved back in '94 in the setup of this, is one club, even though it's got 118 subsidiary hot rod and custom clubs. The NZHRA is one club. The MCA, Motorhome and Caravan Association, who joined in 2010, is one club. So the other 147 are all the other clubs that we're all involved with all around the country. The whole model of the Federation is voluntary. And so everything that you're hearing tonight, everything we do is all done on a voluntary basis for all the good that that brings, because it brings us fresh eyes and grassroots thinking and all the rest of it. But it has the downsides in the sense that we have no budget to actually bring in expertise or experts that we actually might have to pay for. So voluntary is a key piece of it. In my personal view, and I'm stressing this here, the Federation, I think over the years as I look at it, and I look at really in many ways where we're at today, the best word I could come up with is we're a pretty static organisation. Not everyone's heard of us, most of them in the room have, but not that many outside of the room really know what the Federation does or who it is or whatever. Even over that 30 years, there's only ever been 7 presidents. In 14 of those 30 years, there were only 2 presidents. One did 7 years, another did 7 years. So there's a level, and this is not to be critical. It's just a statement of the reality of who we are today. There hasn't been a lot of, for want of a better word, fresh blood. The AGMs of the Federation have never had an election where if we've got 6 executive positions, we've got 8 names and we've got to pick the 6 out of the 8. It's only ever been at every AGM that I can track down, I've gone back at least to 2011, the number of nominations for the 6 positions have been exactly 6. There's never been a competitive election for out of 2 people who want to be president. So there's a sort of a static, or whatever the right words are, flavour to who we are. We've only had 2 secretaries, Chris Butler today, doing a great job, and before him, Roy Hughes, but the 2 of them have if that's the right word, have been in that position since 2010. 15 years, nearly 15 years. We don't have the funding. As an organisation, we've somehow set ourselves up in such a way that we draw in the income we do through the annual subs, which is basically covering our basic costs, and there's nothing left over to do something different. Now, we built up a little bit of money over time, which we then invested into the survey, and I'll come back to that in a moment. But even right now, and David, where's David sitting in the room? David's in the back. David Raven is the Vice President of the Federation. David, I should have introduced you, and Bruce Lewis up here. But David is our Vice President and our Treasurer. And David will tell you, if I don't, we just don't have a lot of money to spend on doing stuff. I'm here tonight at my own cost because the Federation hasn't got $1,000 to spend on an air ticket and airport parking, Christchurch to Tauranga and back. And that's fine. But that's who we are. That's why I say we're a little caught in this little jam, if that's the right word. As I talk about these early days of the Federation, I also just on the part from a VCC Bay of Plenty viewpoint, Don, want to make special mention on from a Federation viewpoint to yourselves as Bay of Plenty, but also have we got Taupo representatives here? I believe we have. I also want to pay special mention to the role that Norm Poynton has played in these early years of the Federation, because there is no doubt that whilst I'm being a little direct in some of my comments, there's been some really great people who've put their heart and soul and energy into where we are today, and Norm was one of them. And I just want to say thank you, and we recognise that. Okay, so let's go then to the next slide. Because if all of that, and I don't want it to sound overly negative, but I'm trying to be honest because I'm trying to take you on, again, a journey here. The other issue that's going on here is what is going on in other spheres around us. What are the other influences or the issues going on? Because we live, as we all know, in times of change and challenge. And am I right? The speed of that change and challenge, or the rate of change and challenge, seems to be speeding up, one man's opinion. Carbon footprint, climate change, environmental pressures. These are in no special order. Government attitudes, policies, responsiveness, responsibilities, all of that whole area of what's happening in government and where do they sit, and with regard to whatever we're talking about, or even other wider issues. What I sense is increasing frustration, maybe due to specific issues that are going on with regard to compliance, certification, regulations, and so on. Trade sector pressures. Many of you will be well connected into the trades, whether it's automotive mechanicking, servicing, engineering, particularly from a vintage viewpoint, in terms of machining parts, wooden wheels, whatever. The experts, the numbers are reducing, and there's no real plan bringing new people through. I know George Keir, as the president of the VCC, is very much on the same page. George and I should add in here, in our collective roles, he is president of the VCC, myself as president of the Federation. We're both Christchurch, if you like, or Canterbury based. We spend a lot of time talking. We're on the same page. We share a lot of stuff, even on a one-on-one basis as we're bouncing ideas around. And I know George is very much on the same page as well when it comes to the trade sector. I didn't know how to write these next words, but the whole issue of the fact that, I won't use the word age, all I'll say is none of us are getting any younger. Intentions across society are changing, the realities are changing. We live in a world of social change. And to me, that seems to be speeding up, particularly when you then factor in generation, X, Y, and Z and their attitudes and where things are going. Who knows? Increasing commercial interests in players, I sense. I've never heard it officially from anyone, but I see the big players, and again, I'm not picking on them, but the Americanas of this world, the beach hops, so on. Good luck to them. Don't get me wrong. I'm not anti-business. Good luck to them. But it's changing the game plan a little of the events the rest of us have to run, because you will have members in your club, like we have in our club in Canterbury, who go on a run of ours. It's all a bit average and whatever it might be, but suddenly they're away on beach hop or Americana and the photos are coming in every 3 hours and they're loving the hype and all the rest of it. You know, some of the commercial operators are setting a standard that we shouldn't ignore, I don't think. And there's other issues. I mean, I haven't tried to put them all here. The whole issue of club membership. I know as a federation, we lost a club last week or 10 days ago who got to the point where they said it's just not worth carrying on. Our membership is declining and whatever. And we've decided we're pulling out of the federation. Yes, it was a smaller club, but it's the reality of the pressures that are out there. The other whole issue, which I haven't put on screen, the whole complications around health and safety and traffic management and what that now means if you're running a full scale or a reasonably big event. What you have to spend today in traffic management and all the other hoops you've got to jump for, we didn't do 5 years ago. Another complication. But the interesting thing, and I wanted to put it up there, is that coming out of the survey and coming out of what we see on the streets, the public at large actually still seems to be at least as enthusiastic about what we do, if not more enthusiastic. So that's a good sign. So I don't want this whole thing to be negative. All of the stuff we've just talked about, we put into the 2-day workshop that as a federation executive, we did last November, just on a year ago, and I'll come to that in a moment. Okay, the survey itself, I'm not going to talk about this in great detail tonight. It's been out there. Let's go straight into the next slide. Just a couple of touch points I want to, I guess, hit on here. The survey itself, and those who are aware of it or may not be aware of it, it started actually way back in 2019, and then it all sort of got put on hold through COVID and so on. The project team, which was Michael Anderson, Chris Dyer, many of you will know Chris through his Model T and Model A associations, and myself, we were the three on that team. We kicked off pretty much in June 2022 to get the survey underway. In round terms, and our chief financial officer is at the back of the room and he'll tell me if I get this wrong, but it was basically a $55,000 project for a federation that didn't have a lot of money. But we bit the bullet and said, right, this is important to do it. It's important to do it right. So let's dig deep and see what we can achieve. So in the end, what we did is we funded basically what you see, the $55,000 there. We funded 42,000 of that from a whole group of what we call gold sponsors. In there was the federation itself at $5,000, the VCC at $5,000, the NZHRA at $5,000, the MCA, Motorhome and Caravan Association at $5,000. Those three groups, all by the way, were contacted by phone call by myself. They all made the decision within 24 hours and with full support, which was great. There were a number of other private sponsors that we got on board. Some of them were in the form of clubs as well. That all added up to 42. We then went out to all of the clubs across New Zealand and said, look, this is what we're doing. We think it's important. We're close, but not quite there. As a club, would you like to dig in? Would you like to make a donation? Your call. Could be 50, could be whatever. And out of that, we got, in fact, 41 clubs who collectively put in the balance of the 55, which I think was $13,000 odd, 14 maybe, across 41 clubs. So that's how we got it together. We got it up and running. The point I want to make here in terms of all of the work that went into it, you've seen the final report. If you've gone online, you might have sifted through 150 pages of the full report. I just want to make the plug, and I don't need to do this, but I think it's, from a federation viewpoint, it's important that I share the story. We had the best research company in New Zealand do that job. If there's ever any discussion around your clubs or you hear it socially or whatever, you know, why did you use those guys? Someone else could have done it better or whatever. They are one of New Zealand's top rated research companies. The owner of the company, Colin Yee, has been working in automotive research since 1989. And the guy, Duncan Stewart, who actually did all the hard yards, is not only one of New Zealand's highest accredited personal researchers in terms of his academic and experience qualities, but he's a petrol head. He and I would, and Michael Anderson would be sitting with Duncan as we're talking about a particular survey or a sector of the survey we wanted to do, whether it was Hot Rod Association, custom and hot rods, or we might be talking about vintage motorcycles. Duncan had a knowledge of those sectors. He knew brands, he knew people who've got them, he had stories, he had petrol in his veins. So they did a great job. As you see there, 15,500 surveys. I've heard people say, well, hang on, Gary, you've got 140,000 members. Why only 15,000? You cannot survey 140,000 people in any which way today. You won't get a different answer because 15,500 is more than statistically valid. And secondly, if you tried to survey 140,000 people, you'd go broke very quickly. And so all I want to say to you is assure you in terms of the background of the survey, totally statistically valid. And if you think about the fact that in that 15,500 and all those surveys that are in there, we covered 6 different sectors across, whether it be historics, classic cars, vintage machinery, motorbikes, hot rod customs, etc. And we covered across a number of other groups like trades, private collections, museums. They all had different questionnaires. And each of those questionnaires, in some cases, had 50, or you all filled, many of you will have filled out the questions. You know how it went on and on and on. There were something like 50 or 55 questions on average in those surveys. Some were less, some were more. If you imagine that amount of data with that complexity on a spreadsheet, you wouldn't fit the spreadsheet in this room. And that's what Duncan did and managed to get to the conclusions that are in there. So that's me, I guess, just giving you an inside view of the survey itself and the depth. Preliminary results in September last year, we all saw those. Final report in February of 2024. And I'll leave it at that point. The key headlines in here, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through every one of these one by one. The headlines, obviously, that caught the attention was the 16.5 billion economic footprint. Come back to that in a moment. Through the fact that we only drive 3,700 kilometres per year per vehicle on average, we confirmed, we're not a major contributor to carbon emissions. To me, wider than just the sector and the people in our sector, to me, 2 of the big conclusions that the survey gave us that we would never have had otherwise: 71% of the population at large in New Zealand support who we are as historic and classic vehicle owners, what we do as owners and as clubs, and the heritage that we represent. 71% of the population at large. And there was no lead into that question. There was nothing that shaped their thinking one way or another. That's a genuine number. Higher than, quite frankly, we thought it might be. And then in the other exercise that Duncan created, where he got them thinking about if you could, therefore, have one of these vehicles, a classic or historic car, and he gave them options on 19 different cars, from a Model T to a whatever, a Jaguar or whatever, over the years and over the different model ranges and sectors. On average, 26% of the same New Zealanders said, yep, I would love to have that vehicle, whatever their vehicle of choice was, in my garage, if I could do it. If circumstances were right, I would love to have that vehicle. 26% is the average. On some vehicles, it was up as high as 45. On some vehicles, it was as low as 15. But nothing scored 0. And the average across all of those 19 vehicles was 26%. They'd love to have it in their garage. So the market's not dead yet. That's the point I will make out of that. Okay, the final report. That's the big report. It's online. It's on the Federation website. No one will have ever or wanted to download a hard copy. I've only done it so I can stand here and show you what 150 pages looks like. It is immensely full of detail. And it really backs up the whole effort that we collectively, across our clubs, have gone to. I talked a moment ago about the mechanics of pulling all of that together. I won't go back into that in more detail. The point I just do want to touch on is the 16.5 billion. Can you just go back to that earlier slide? That's the one on the top right there. I just want to make mention of that because no one's ever invented that number before. As Michael and I were sitting with Duncan and Colin Yee, the researchers, and they had all this data coming in, I was looking at it, I guess thinking about it of how, as president, we were going to communicate this to ministers, the Mike Hoskings of this world, and so on. And I said, we need a number that grabs everyone's attention. And they said, well, how are you going to do that, Gary? Whatever. Because when you looked at the individual numbers, they're all over the place. You know, there's whatever it was. There's money in there that people spend on an annual basis on their car. There's money that that clubs spend and so on. But I wanted a figure that somehow grabbed everyone's attention. So we invented a new concept. I'm just telling you this now, so there's total honesty and transparency. This isn't GDP in the sense of a pure economic viewpoint. When you read about New Zealand's GDP is going up, going down, or whatever it is, that's sort of like the total level of transactions and everything else that's going on. And we've got that in there, but we've got more. We wanted to get to a number which actually said, in simple layperson terms, what do we as the historic and classic vehicle movement represent in this country? What's the dollar figure we actually account for? And so the research guy said, well, actually, how are you going to do this, Gary? Because we can't find an economist who can do this. I said, let's get creative. Let's take all the money that we all spend, not just within the Federation, but extrapolate across all historic and classic owners across New Zealand. We'll take all the money we spend on our vehicles in a year. So that's pretty clear. We take all the money that the public at large spend on going to museums and car shows, whatever, because we had that number. Let's take all the money that the tradespeople are paying their employees in terms of salaries and stuff as best we could get to that. The trade survey still needs a bit of, next time round we'll have a bit more refinement to it, but we got an idea of what the salaries are across the trade sector. But then we went one stage further and we said, well, hang on a minute, that's just the money we spend on an average year basis. But we as a sector are more than that because we've got this investment sitting in the garage or in the workshop or in the collection. And that's money we've got tied up in these vehicles, not spent somewhere else. So we added that in to get to what we call the total economic footprint that we have on the ground in the country. And that's where the 16.5 came from. So no one's queried it. No one's come back and said, Gary, where in the economic textbook do I find the definition of economic footprint? Because basically we created it. It's a legitimate number because we know the individual numbers are absolutely legitimate. We just added them together to say that's what we represent. So that's where that came from. I think that's probably all I'll cover on that right now. If there's other questions on the survey, happy to take them a bit later. We won't be far away now, another 5 minutes. Is that all right? I don't want to go, I won't go past 9. All right? Promise.
No.
Okay.
Well,
Okay, do you want to get into something interesting? Should we talk about, next slide? Okay. This is where it gets tougher. In terms of the government, much of this, I won't go through this in great detail. We as a federation, I guess, coming into office, I guess, after the AGM of 2023, I stepped into the role after Harry in whatever that was, June or July of last year. We had the elections in September. So the first thing we did was get off the mark quickly, and we communicated as Federation directly with the preliminary survey results, the September results, with Simeon Brown, Matt Ducey. Matt Ducey is the Associate Minister of Transport, and with Paul Goldsmith, the Minister of Heritage. We then updated that communication with another round of communications with the final survey result, when the 16.5 came out and so on. We did that all again with the same ministers, but this time we included Chris Luxon. You remember the photos of the Mini from memory, am I right, David? That was Pakuranga, wasn't it? Yeah. Britain Euro show at Pakuranga, where Chris Luxon declared that he's a classic and historic car fan. So he said, right, you're on our list. Got a lovely reply back from him, by the way, directly from the PM, to put them in the picture about the Federation, the updated numbers, 16.5 billion and so on. We also copied that note to David Seymour, who is the coalition leader, as you know, and Minister of Regulation, or in his words, I think, deregulation. He's occupied on other issues at the moment. Harry and David, I couldn't make it, met with Simeon Brown, Minister of Transport in Auckland on April the 17th, and we presented the warrant of fitness proposal from the Federation, brand new proposal. We basically ripped up all the stuff that we'd been talking about with the NZTA for the last 3 to 4 years, because they told us that would never fly. They weren't interested in it anymore. So we said, okay, park that up. Here's the new proposal, which was for 12-month warrants on all vehicles in New Zealand 40 years and older, and vehicles older than 1919, 0 warrants. We put into that a huge amount of work on analysis of the risk factor, particularly around crash statistics and fatality risk, fatality and serious injury, and warrant of fitness performance in terms of how those cars perform going through warrants today, across versus all other cars. So we put all of that proposal together. Harry and I presented that to the Director of Land Transport, Brent Alderton, and his deputy, Mike Hargraves, in late May. We got given an indication that they thought it was a serious proposal. They complimented us on the amount of detail, the amount of work we'd put into it, promised us an early response as best they could. Now, in fairness, NZTA have a few issues on their plates right now. We're not the only ones. And they promised an early response maybe around August, September. We followed up with them in August to see whether or not they were on track. We got indicated then, no, they were running behind time. It would be late October. I then followed up with Mike Hargraves, who's the Deputy Director, who is the one making the decision. And he indicated to me that, I followed up with him on November the 1st, which is 10 days ago, and said, October 31 has come and passed. What's happening, Mike? And he came straight back to me and said, Gary, we're close. I will call you next Friday. That's Friday of last week. So, got the call. Expected to be here tonight and be able to share with you a decision. And what I've been told, and what the Federation, if you like, has been told, just not me personally, is that he has made his preliminary decision on that proposal. The preliminary decision is now being reviewed as it needs to be by, I guess, the other higher echelons or whatever it is within NZTA. and he will be back to me with the decision this week. So here I am on Monday night. I don't have a decision. I'm being absolutely honest and upfront and transparent with you. We'll get that decision sometime this week, and we'll communicate it when we get it. I don't know what it will be. I can't say this meeting's off the record because you can't control everything, and I mean, we're all free to tell whoever, but all I will say to you is that 3 or 4 months ago, we were pretty confident that we'd presented a pretty good case, and the feedback we got was, hey, you guys have done a great job. You've given us more data than we've ever expected. You've answered a lot of our questions around whatever about the potential issues. But now I'm not quite so confident, is probably what I'll say to you. I won't try and pre-read what it's going to be. I suspect we might have some more work to do. Don't know. All I will say is that there's 2 things I guess I want to point out. What I guess we've come to understand, I personally have come to understand, Harry was probably a little further advanced than I was, is that the whole business culture of NZTA is risk averse. It is all about managing risk. And that's basically an outcome of an event that happened in 2019, where NZTA were taken to task by a coroner. That coroner's report got a whole lot of attention in the media. It resulted in massive changes within the NZTA leadership group, but both the directors, the chair, and senior management. And it led to some changes within cabinet, Jacinda Ardern's cabinet, because this coroner's report basically said NZTA had failed in their duty to manage risk that had resulted in a particular fatality in some form of workplace accident involving a vehicle. So where I understand it is this attitude of risk aversion is now paramount within the NZTA. Now, we still believe our data showed there is no risk. We compared the accident and the fatality and serious injury accidents of vehicles 40 years and older, whether they be a classic or historic car or a darned daily driver that someone's still driving, because they're all in that sector, 40 years and older. The fatality and serious injury risk in that sector over the last 20 years is infinitesimal. 2 or 3 accidents, or whatever the number was, it was of that scale in that 20-year period, compared to whatever goes on in all the other sectors. We analysed the warrant of fitness data, and you're not going to believe this, but the pass rate on first check for a 40-year-old plus vehicle in the warrant of fitness testing is it's equal to vehicles that are in 10 years and younger, and 3 of those years are no warrants. And the warrant of fitness failure rate in those 40-year and older vehicles is twice as low, whatever the right words are, than vehicles which are 10 to 20 years or 20 to 30 or 30 to 40. So there is no risk from a warrant of fitness risk viewpoint. In our view, the data shows it. There's no risk from a fatality and serious injury viewpoint. The data showed it. But still, I'm worried they're being risk averse. So I won't say any more, but we're just going to live with it for another 3 or 4 days and see what comes out. That's where we're at on that. I think that probably covers everything I can cover on that. There is Plan B, the 40-year warrant thing. We called internally Plan A. We didn't call it Plan A at the time, but when we started getting a bit nervous, I called it Plan A, because we then started, a couple of us, brainstorming Plan B. All I can say is, if Plan A doesn't work, Bruce, David, right, we're going to go for Plan B, whatever that looks like. We'll see how that works out. Okay, let's just now go to the future of the Federation. Last couple of slides, guys, and seriously, we're out of this. Okay, very quickly, the first two slides. Won't go through all of this in detail. Out of our workshop back in November last year, new executive came in June, July of last year. I came in as president. Bruce at that stage had not joined us. He joined us this year. But David and I and the balance of the executive got together in a hotel in Wellington for 2 days at my request, really, to say, right, it's time to start thinking about the future. Let's start working on it. We signed up after lots of discussion and brainstorming and workshops and goodness knows what, to the vision, which you see there. I'll send this out and you can, Karen can help send it out to everybody as well. So the vision is straightforward. The mission is straightforward. We used this in the AGM last year as well. Coming out of that on the next slide, we came out with strategic objectives that we want to pursue. This is like big picture stuff we want to do. No rocket science in here. We need to increase the revenue and funding coming into the Federation because right at the moment we're actually going backwards, or treading water is probably a better word. We want to protect and celebrate our heritage. Interestingly, that was on the agenda way back in 1994, and there's not a lot been done about that. We want to be an effective voice with government to the best we can be. We want to enhance trade skills and training, talked about that before. We want to plan and implement an affordable Federation structure, including succession planning. And we want to share, publicise and leverage the results of the survey. Okay, all of that's big picture words. The next slide is the important one. Right now, if you talk to me over coffee and you say, well, actually, Garry, that's all very interesting. What's the Federation actually working on? In the volunteer group that we are, because that's all we are, we meet by Zoom every sort of 4 to 5 weeks. We've all got other day jobs and pressures and priorities, whatever. But as a volunteer group, and I guess I take the responsibility of trying to make all this come together and help make it happen, these are the actual specific work plans that, quite frankly, I'm signed up to. And through the team, hopefully we will make progress on between now and I'll say the end of next year. So I'm talking about the balance of the current financial year, or the AGM year through to the AGM in June, and then in the 6 months or so beyond that. So this is not all going to happen overnight. But here's what we want to do. Some of this was in the a note that went out earlier, I think, to all clubs. We want to grow the revenue, and I mentioned this a moment ago, across our clubs today. So all cards on the table. There's going to be a proposal come to you before the AGM next year, which is probably going to bump up your membership fee of the Federation a little bit. I won't put a number on it, but manageable level, fingers crossed. I mean, it's got to be manageable to be sensible, to lift the revenue across our club. We've got some clubs. I saw one today that is, I don't know, only obviously a small club, but their membership fee to the Federation is $26 a year. Now, what do you buy for 26 bucks? I think we've got to get real. If we're going to do some of the stuff we need clubs across their membership, relative to size and whatever, to sort of come to the party. And again, there'll be more talk on this, and there'll be more thinking and more two-way discussion, but I need to signal it. The second thing we need to do at the same time is get more clubs on board into the Federation. We've lost 2 or 3 that I'm aware of, I think, over the last 3 to 4 months. I think now, what is it, David? We've picked up 5 or 6 in the last sort of 3 to 4 months. And there's more in the wings, so that we're working on. I've delegated to each of the executive, I want you to bring 3 new clubs into the Federation by the end of this current year, June of next year. So we're working, and if you can help on that, if you've got fellow clubs out there that you think, God, they should be part of the Federation, then you don't have to go and do the hard yards on them. Just let us know, and we'll take the lead on that. The third piece that we're working on, and it's linked, these 2 next dot points are actually linked, and Bruce is taking a lead on helping to do this. How many of you in this room are members of the in your other interests of the MCA, Motorhome and Caravan. Quite a few. Many of you will know how well the MCA model works in terms of, as a member of the MCA, whatever your annual sub is, the discounts you get, whether it's on fuel or Picton ferries, whatever, very quickly put your membership fee that you sign up with as an individual into perspective, because you get these great benefits when you fill the tank, book a Cook Strait ferry or whatever. Am I correct?
Yeah.
It works pretty well. The piece I'm not sure you know is that the way that deal is set up, many of those companies, I can't say all of them, provide over and above the discount they give to you as the member, provide a kickback to the head office of the MCA, which runs their head office structure. And that's the model we're wanting to try and duplicate. All cards on the table. Different companies, but that's the approach we want to take. We want to get to a point to help grow more clubs joining up, to help hold on to the membership you've got in your existing clubs. If we came out to you with a membership deal for your members on fuel, I'm making this up as I stand here, fuel is certainly one we're talking with, accommodation, travel, whether that's ferries or whatever, restaurants, who knows what else. If we could put that deal together with 4 or 5 big name national suppliers, where you as a member of XYZ Car Club get your card, which gets you whatever that discount is, but at the same time it kicks a little rebate back into the federation. It takes the pressure off clubs having to pay membership fees at a higher rate, and it drives money for us to put back into next time we do the survey or whatever the case may be. We are working pretty hard on that, right, Bruce? But we've got a step that we need to take, which I'm going to come to, which is actually beyond what we can do, and I need your help on. I'll come to that in a moment. But that's one of the things we're working on. The other idea that, in all honesty, I floated with the executive, thinking outside the square to bring in some money and bring in some new thinking. Over and above the clubs and the traditional structure of the AGM, and you elect the executive and that's how we run, what if we had an outside group of, for want of a better word, associate partners who aren't members of the association, of the federation, but who are a think tank that maybe David and I can use 3 or 4 times a year, and like a Zoom meeting, to brainstorm new ideas. And those associate partners might pay $1,000 a year for the privilege of being an associate partner, but they get the input to put ideas on the table, whether it's about new style of events we've never run, or sponsorship ideas, or other benefits, or what's going on in the world of trade training. And I won't name names of the companies we're talking, but we're talking about people who've got their roots and their blood in classic and historic cars, but they can't get their thinking through to us through a club structure. But if they had a Zoom call with the vice president and myself every 4 months, and they could put ideas on the table and we could brainstorm where it might take us all, I think I know already 5 or 6 or more people who would sign up for that. So we're kicking it around. We've got to think about how it fits in the Constitution. We've got to do all of, but it's to letting you know, I guess, if nothing else, there's some ideas starting to germinate, which are outside the square, to try and take us forward and bring fresh thinking in. Revitalising the Federation Executive. I'm delighted that Bruce has now joined us and brings a business acumen and an energy to the table. We've got a new advisor on the executive, Chris Hogg. Anyone know Chris? Ferrari Owners Club of New Zealand. Lives in Kapiti, really dynamic guy, early 60s, been to our last 2 AGMs, contributed well from the floor, is now an advisor to the exec and potentially on the executive full-time next year. Next job we've got to do is finalise our constitution for 2026. Many of you have probably been through that already. We've got that underway. They are the priorities. Over behind getting those underway, I don't want to lose sight on the fact we still got to try and make some progress on heritage. Hope to get with Paul Goldsmith either before the end of this year, the Minister of Heritage, or early next year. Trades training, I'm pursuing that in more detail with George Keir. We're going to keep pushing government, whether it's on Plan B or whatever, and maybe somewhere down the track we have to think about another survey, but that's not today's call. Okay, so with that last slide, is that good? Parting thoughts from me, just as we wrap up. I want to say thanks to the VCC Bay of Plenty. Don, thank you. And Karen. Is Karen out the back there? Is Karen with us? But I just want to pay particularly special attention from my viewpoint to Karen Smiley, because she really facilitated me and making sure that I got here and putting it all together. A conversation that started some months ago. So thanks to the club and to Karen in particular. Thanks to you all for being here. It's great. Many of you I know have driven a little while to get here. Thanks for the chance to share the messages. If nothing else, I hope I've put the Federation maybe into a sort of a sharper perspective for you, or maybe for some a newer perspective. I want you to go out of here positive about what we're all doing, even if the darned, I was almost going to swear then, the darned warrant of fitness decision doesn't go our way, or doesn't go our way completely. Don't be negative. Somehow we're going to be positive and turn it around somehow, some way. So let's keep that attitude going. Let's all continue to be active in everything we do and be proud of what we're doing. Because as we said in here, we're all part of a $16.5 billion footprint. I need your help. Personally, we as the Federation need our help on one thing. I need you going out of here and talking with other clubs, or sharing it somehow through the likes of VCC, Don. When I talked before, and I was looking at Bruce there about the MCA program and trying to do a deal with fuel companies, restaurants, whatever, that will rely on not us doing the deal with them, but it will rely on all of us as clubs, and I'll put the Canterbury Mustang Owners Club into this as well. So I'm saying this is a club viewpoint, not as a federation. It will rely on the quality and the expertise we have in our clubs to communicate at the drop of a hat when you're asked to, with all of your members, with a message. We cannot go out to a fuel company, let's just call it XYZ, whoever they may be, and sell them on the idea of this great fuel deal to the Federation, and it's 150 clubs and it's 140,000 members. If we can't get that message, and whatever it might be, the fuel card or the electronic code or whatever it turns out to be, for that fuel company, to every one of, I'll pick on Bruce, on every one of your 250 members. If you don't have that system in place, that you, at the drop of a hat on a message from the Federation, can take that message that we give you, all you're going to have to do is, copy it and forward it on, but get it out to all of your people, because you've got reliable communications, you've got accurate email addresses, they look, etc., etc. If we can't do that, we can't sell this thing in the first place, because we're actually trying to sell the buying power of 150,000 members, the number you saw. So the one thing, and all cards on the table, as I learn more and more as in my role, I understand more and more from Chris Butler, our great secretary, of the frustrations he has getting messages out there, getting responses from clubs. We've still got 40 clubs who have not yet paid this year's subscription. Some of that problem's at our end with Google IT problems, going through Google Gmail addresses, that's another issue. But some of it lies in clubs themselves who don't get onto a message quickly enough, and in some cases where it needs to be, in this case, the membership fee, but in the likes of what I'm talking about with the fuel company deal, we need to know you can communicate with your people quickly, efficiently, the moment you need to do so if it's important for what we're all trying to do. So if I leave you with that message as I wrap this up, we've all got a responsibility to collectively work together on all of those future plans, because by goodness, we're going to make it happen. So thank you for your time tonight. Thanks for learning a little bit more, hopefully, about the Federation, a little bit about me. Sorry, that went a bit long, but at least now you see where we're all coming from. So great to be with you tonight. Look forward to having a chat. Take any major questions now, or we can talk over coffee, or however you want to handle it, Dom.
Okay, thank you, Gary, and thank you for a really informative delivery there. You've demonstrated adequately that time is the essence and communication. That's the real key. Now, before Gary, I let him sit down, and before we have our big spread that Elwyn and his good lady have coordinated for us tonight, any quick questions from the floor, please? Go. Alistair, down the back.
Gary, on your slide there where the heading was mission, you said you wanted, as always, to ensure that we had the ability to drive our vehicles on all roads with restrictions. Shouldn't that be?
That should be without.
Yeah.
Did you pick up the deliberate spelling mistake? Yeah.
I think you're trying to get some sort of licensing thing so that we have to.
No, you're right. Yeah, should be without. Yeah. Done. It'll be changed before it goes out tonight in hard copy.
No, question over there.
Okay,
Gary,
no.
insane warrant fitness regime we have in this country, is the Federation look at other Western countries to see what they have? Because some of them appears to me they have nothing. The onus is on the owner.
The answer is yeah, Dale, but the reality is we can't get rid of the NZTA. I mean, like it or not, we are stuck with the NZTA, and that's the only way we can, I could spend a fortune, I could spend every hour of my life researching the rest of the world. It won't make a scrap of difference. And I don't mean that to sound negative. I'm not a negative person, but somehow we got to find a way to get through the NZTA and the culture and it's not just culture, it's the structure we have. Because somewhere in our past, and we're all responsible for it, and the way we voted, maybe we never got told at the time what was being planned, but somewhere over time, and it's before my time, I guess, or maybe I took my eye off the ball sometime years ago, but the government somehow empowered NZTA. We need Chris Butler here to give us the detail. Empowered NZTA under legislation that these are your responsibilities. And there isn't a minister yet who's ready to step up and do anything about it. The one minister that could be a long shot, and this is a wider issue, let me touch on it. Anyone heard of Ella Forrest? Not many heard of Ella Forrest. That's interesting. Ella Forrest started a petition on social media back in February, wasn't it? I think it's February. And it was a petition to get rid of NZTA, get rid of warrants, do everything the way it's done in the best countries around the world, not only from a warrant viewpoint, but the whole areas of compliance and certification. And Ella Forrest addressed this petition to David Seymour, the Minister of Regulation. Ella deliberately didn't go to the existing structure, Simeon Brown, Minister of Transport. Ella went to David because David Seymour was the minister as a private minister, independent minister, who put the end of life bill through Parliament as a single MP and got it through. So Ella regards David Seymour as an agent of change. It's a long answer to your question. I talked about Plan B a moment ago. Connect the dots. And Ella Forrest, by the way, got 5,600 signatures on that petition, 4,000 of whom, I think, the gentleman down the back knows the detail, I think, made comments as well. And the stories you could write, I mean, it would form a book is of all the things that are done wrong in certification, warrants, whatever. But Ella has never yet presented that petition, to my knowledge, to David Seymour. That's one of my conversations of next week.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, thanks for coming up here and doing this. Have you ever thought about doing like a short 20-minute video that we could take to our clubs there's with 2 people, 3 people actually from our club. And we're gonna have to go to a club meeting tomorrow night and try and explain what you've just said in almost 2 hours.
No, it's a great idea.
In that last 20 minutes.
Yeah,
A lot of our club members have no idea who the federation is. And what you've just said to us, I thought I should have brought a video. But to have that to replay to members would just be unbelievable because people just don't know who you are.
I never thought of that. We actually should have videoed it tonight.
And the way you speak.
You have. We got it. We got it.
If you could do that on a pen drive or on, I don't know how else you do it, but do it on something and then get it out, have it available to clubs.
You see how
Pretty cool.
you see why we got really great guys on the executive? It's way ahead of me. Hey, good call.
And the other thing is, all you'd have to do is increase individual membership by $1 per member to have 150,000. I believe the federation should have like $500,000 to $1 million in the bank. Because it's only a matter of time before something will come up in Parliament and you'll have to get professional adults to fight it.
You're right.
There was a one recently where a guy wrote a paper, 40-page paper on getting rid of left-hand drive vehicles. So there was 2 options. New left-hand drive vehicles coming into the country, get rid of them completely. And the other option was to get rid of all existing vehicles, left-hand drive vehicles. This is a matter of interest. He presented that to our select committee. And the guy didn't have a driver's license, had never driven a left-hand drive vehicle, never used any statistics. Someone in the select committee owned a left-hand drive vehicle and came back to them with statistics on the accident rate of left-hand drive vehicles in New Zealand. That's how easy it is to get rid of left-hand drive vehicles in New Zealand.
As the owner of 4 Mustangs, I've got a vested interest in. I'm with you 100%. Yeah.
I believe the federation, because of your pool of people, should have $500,000 to $1 million in the bank to fight it.
That's the target. Yeah, I know. I'm with you 100%.
Okay, we've got one last question over there, because I know time's, or two questions, and then Sid, I'm sorry, because.
And then I'll be around.
Yep.
Just a quick question, Gary. Getting back to the 40-year-old cut-off point for Warren
Yeah.
and I was led to believe that to be part of that situation, all those vehicles, the owners had to be a member of a car club.
No. That was in the original proposal that Harry and the Federation had put together and presented over the last 4 years. And it wasn't tied to 40 years, but it was built around members being part of the Federation or members of a car club. That just would never fly within the NZTA because they don't have the mechanics or the IT to monitor that. And so that's why we then went back, based on the fact that Britain had announced 0 warrants in their case, or MOT, whatever it's called, 0 after 40 years and older. That's when we went back and thought, hey, let's rejig this. Let's go back to the NZTA and say no warrants on any vehicle 40 years and older, even if it's a daily driver, an old XA Falcon or a HQ Holden or whatever it might be. Let's go and ask for that, because NZTA can actually manage that within their existing structure and within their existing IT. You know, if we had to introduce names of clubs and members of, you can't do that within their system. So that's why we did it that way. Plan B might be a variation on that.
Okay. One more?
Yes, just one more. Gary.
Sorry, yeah, no, I've done.
Don't worry about me.
I know a number of members here tonight are a bit concerned that at some stage in the near future, we won't be able to drive our petrol cars anymore with a push to either electric, hybrid, whatever it happens to be. I'm assuming that this is one of the things that the Federation are talking to government about.
Yeah, and that was one of the very big points made in the meeting with Simeon Brown. And that's why this is so important. Because we could have sat there a year ago or 2 years ago when that same issue's been talked about and said, well, you know, we represent whatever. And they would say, yeah, but how important is your we can now say, you know, you're talking with a $16.5 billion footprint. Are you going to turn around and tell 150,000 people who've got a footprint in this economy of $16.5 billion that you're not going to support us? So we are talking and we are using this. And that's another reason why I might make the point why this is important. This wasn't just done as a bit of a fun exercise to put on a shelf. This was done to give us a tool to work with. And so far it's worked gangbusters in, you know, in the best way. The other reason why I wanted to say about clubs, one final point that I've forgotten about, because the world is changing and no one reads the Herald or the Christchurch Press to the Dominion the way they always used to, or listen to traditional radio, and you can't trust television or whatever, the power is in social media. And one of the things why I was pushing before around communication is that we all collectively, because when we launched this, you know, the final report back in February, we gave you the materials, we gave you the links, and we actually, over words I wrote, specifically asked, get this out to your members, encourage them to use these links to post it onto their own Facebook pages, social media pages. I mean, I don't know about you, but I see posts from the Canterbury Mustang Owners Club and the Bay of Plenty Mustang Owners Club all the time where people post different stories. It goes around everywhere. And so what I'm getting to here is we can't rely on newspapers covering this anymore. Used to be if you gave this to the Dominion and 2ZB in Wellington, it would be right across the country in 12 hours. That doesn't happen anymore. If you're lucky, you get Mike Hosking to talk about it 1 week later. And he did talk about it well, but it was 1 week later. But we've got the power through social media that we need to energize through our clubs to get some of these big stories out there. You know, just we'll give you the links and the words to use. Just send it on to your people and encourage them to do it, is all I can ask.
Excellent summing up there, actually, Gary. That says it all.
Okay.
Thank you. Look, thank you, Gary, so much for coming and for that excellent delivery. We've got a little presentation. I'd like to ask Karen, our club captain, to present this little package to you. It's not a $16.5 billion package, but it's a little thank you from us. Karen, if you could just come up here, please, and hand this to Gary. It's a token of our appreciation for coming from Christchurch, talking to us tonight. I got a lot out of it, and I hope the audience did too. There you go, Karen.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all.
Gary, I've got one last little job you've got to do tonight before you sit down and mix and mingle. We've got a raffle to draw.